Hello, I'm here to talk about how Amazon culture really provides the foundation and the basis for everything we do here, including our tradition of operational excellence, true for the store and especially true for AWS. This idea of strong culture is really the backbone of Amazon Web Services, and it provides us the way of understanding how we will behave with one another, how we will interact with one another, because that is truly the purpose of culture. My name is Peter O'Donnell. I'm a principal solutions architect here at AWS, and I've been here for 8 years working with some of our largest and most challenging customers. And what I've seen during this time is that, yeah, we have some cool services, but what is foundational to what we do is the culture and the mechanisms it produces and the norms that it provides for us that really allows us to deliver on our promise of highly durable, secure, resilient solutions, not only for our customers, but also for the rest of Amazon. Let's talk about culture. What is the purpose of culture? Well, as it turns out, the purpose of culture is to eliminate renegotiation. And this can be a strange phrase when you first hear it. What it really means is that there's a series of behaviors, a series of norms, expectations that you can have of yourself and that others will have of you. And so when you get to a stairwell here in the West, you know to go up the right. And if you're visiting Japan and you get into the Tokyo subway and you approach the stairs, you stay to the left. And not only do you not have to have a discussion about it, there's no negotiating about it in that moment, but it would be foolish to try to do so. That this is already well established. It was here before you got here. And this is how we operate. And that culture is what provides that normative expectation. It's for truly what we do and how we operate. So at Amazon, the culture is very defined and very specific around this idea of leadership principles, and there are 14 of them. This is just a few, but these ones in particular, I feel map directly to our culture of operational excellence and this idea of building resiliency, not only into our technical architectures, but resiliency into our human events as well. Our North Star is this idea of customer obsession. And customer obsession as this critical idea is not centrism. It's not focus. It's obsession. And as we go through this talk, you'll hear how this idea of working backwards becomes so critical for us. By focusing on the customer and working backwards to produce those outcomes is the exact same way that we deliver highly available and resilient solutions. When we work emergent issues, when things fail, we depend on the culture of ownership and of being right a lot. And this critical idea pervades everything we do, including when we work a root cause of diving deep and of understanding true delivering results at the highest possible standards. When we work at Amazon and when we work an emergent issue in response to a failure or an event, and most especially when we design the service in the first place, that we are always working backwards from the customer to build a solution that meets their needs. In our role as a cloud services provider, AWS has a special obligation to work backwards because our customers build their systems on using our products. And so this idea of working backwards becomes a foundational tenet for the rest of what we do, including and especially our commitment to operational excellence and resiliency. Once we have this kind of cultural norm of values and behaviors, we need something further. When we think about designing systems and responding to events, we know that good intentions do not work. And what does work is this idea of mechanisms. That at Amazon, we are tool builders. And it's not enough to just build the tool. We must drive that adoption to produce a defined outcome, to produce this effect that we want. And we know that we must inspect that creation of that tool, inspect its adoption over time, because again, good intentions simply do not work by themselves. And so we have a few tenets, the way we think about our mechanisms, that we build them in such a way, knowing that we have to obsess over our customers, again, a cultural norm. And we know that doing so is not always going to be comfortable. It's not always going to be pleasant, and it may be inconvenient, but we know that it is essential to approach problems and resiliency this way. And we know that as we build these mechanisms, we must celebrate their utility, that we must advocate for not only their adoption, but celebrate when we get it right. We know that we're humans. We know that things are hard and challenging, sometimes more often than not. And by driving these mechanisms into everything we do, it becomes the mechanism is a mechanism itself. Because over and over, we're creating new mechanisms to drive assurance and drive performance and drive availability and fundamentally to drive resiliency into our systems. Because the purpose of the system is not the system itself. The purpose of the system is that it can provide the basis for somebody else to build a system on top of it. But sometimes these systems are going to fail. And we know that when we approach failure, we have to really be unrelenting in examining exactly what happened. What is going on here? It's not just a simple thing, and in a complex system, it's never one thing. So we have this idea of the 5 whys, of unpacking a problem all the way down to its guts. Sometimes we get asked, why 5? Well, that kind of ends up being maybe the right number, right? There's only so many layers of abstraction and misdirection in any system. And sure, it could be 4, and maybe sometimes it's 6 or 7, but 5 whys turns out to be a pretty good mnemonic. But the point here is not the quantity of questions, but the unrelenting desire to get to the truth that underlies what is happening. That we must unrelentingly explore the true nature of the system, unrelentingly explore the true nature of the failure, not only to understand it, but more importantly, to ensure that it does not recur. And when we do this, we of course do this with an eye towards the severity. Our North Star is working backwards from the customer, and so correspondingly, when we think about what's important and we think about what to prioritize, that is how we get there. So root cause analysis means really drilling in and understanding the complete problem with data. And it also means perhaps deploying countermeasures that on the way to correcting the problem and preventing recurrence, which may take weeks, months of engineering effort, that we can still deploy some mitigations. At a minimum, that might be better observability and alarming. It might be responding to the precipitating events in ways that can mitigate those effects as they accumulate over time. We know that mistakes are easy to make, and we know that mistakes are even easier to make when we're under duress. And so we have these mechanisms lined up ahead of time, whether that's run books or truly a programmatic systemic response to a failure, to help our leaders avoid making mistakes under duress. And because we know these are complex systems, we will never allow ourselves to be seduced in the middle of the night by pointing at just one thing. This idea, the fallacy of pointing at it, well, it's this, it must be this. Because these systems were originally designed and architected in a way to, of course, avoid any kind of single point of failure. And that means that they're going to fail in ever more interesting and complex ways. And because we know that at the outset we avoided single points of failure, everybody does, this also means, conversely, that we've inherited a complex system that is going to fail in complicated and sometimes unpredictable ways. Gray failures can be very, very challenging in a distributed system. And without a strong culture of ownership and bias for action and diving deep and this unrelenting focus on unpacking the 5 whys behind any one failure, We know that that is what is necessary for a complex system. In a simple system, just turning on a light bulb, the failure is very obvious. But in a more complicated system, where the light bulb may be flickering or even dim, the true failure may be difficult to notice over time. And so we've had to examine the way we deliver these systems very richly to understand not only the nature of our failure and our response, but truly the nature of the system itself that drives the nature of this failure and the response. Is when we examine root causes, we know that it's never going to be a single thing because it is almost always a very complex system. That means it's going to fail in unexpected ways. So this means unpacking problems over and over and over. That not just pointing at, oh, the memory overflowed, or oh, the disk overflowed, or oh, the CPU got spiked. But why? What really happened? What led to this? And not only what led to this, but how did we not know? Observability and alarming are very often our next moves to correct an error. Because as it turns out, yes, a complex system is difficult. And yes, a complex system can be hard to predict. But once it happens, you now know about it. That failure mode is now known to you and your engineering team. And so this unrelenting approach of going why is absolutely critical. Because these systems fail in complex ways, we must attempt to make them simple. And so if it's a simple case of like, why do we run out of coffee? The answer might actually be because we don't have a mechanism to ensure the inventory of our coffee filters. That it's not as simple as saying nobody made the coffee. That there's actually something that underlies those behaviors, that underlies those phenomena, and getting to them is the only path to ensuring that it doesn't recur. And true resilience, true availability in a highly complex distributed system means requiring this unrelenting approach to understanding exactly what happened in the system. That it's not as simple as a component failure. It's not as simple as a lack of maintenance. Again, because we know that good intentions do not work, and because we know that mechanisms do, once we get to the bottom of the 5 whys, it's often the case that what was missing was a mechanism. We know that doing root cause can be very hard, and that there's lots of dynamics in going all the way into understanding a complex problem. And the focus really has to be on understanding not the problem, but understanding how to prevent it from recurring. That is your North Star, because again, we're working backwards from the customer. And this means avoiding types of cognitive behaviors that might cause you to be distracted. It's too easy to point at one thing and say, well, that must be it. It's too easy to point at something that you just saw and say, oh, well, it's probably this again. And there's a couple of these. And by having the strong culture of this unrelenting commitment to diving deep and of having high standards in delivering results as an expectation that everyone has of themselves and one another, that we can be more effective in root cause analysis. But the analysis is not the point. The true point is a secondary process at Amazon that we call correction of error, the COE. And what the COE really means is, okay, we had this problem. Okay, we understand exactly what happened. We understand the circumstances that led to it. We understand maybe missing alarms, missing monitors, missing canaries, or synthetic alerts. But what we really want to do is unsubscribe from the problem at all. We want to design our systems in a way such that not only the failure will not recur, but perhaps even get to a place where it cannot recur. Pardon me, and this sometimes means weeks or months of new engineering. And until that time, again, we put in mitigations. We can put in additional alarms. But the true work that, again, may take a very long time after the event is this idea of correction of error. And at AWS, we have some old problems. We work a backlog. But we work very, very hard to ensure that we don't have the same problem twice. And this correction of error process mechanism is fundamental to that. So again, I kind of talked about how the purpose of culture is to eliminate renegotiation. That what we really want is a normative set of behaviors about which we can all agree that give us the opportunity to do things right over and over and over. And when we get them wrong, to know exactly what we're going to do in response to it. And that one of the ways we ensure resilience, yes, is our technical architecture. And yes, it is our response to problems. But what I really want you to understand out of this talk is that it is the cultural norms that underlie it that really power what we do at Amazon Web Services. That it's this strong culture of rigor, of obsessive ownership that allows us to build what we have built and allows our customers to depend on us. This means feedback loops. This means a culture of no blame. This means an unrelenting focus on the idea of the mechanism, building it, advocating for its adoption, and then inspecting it over time to either improve it or, maybe unexpectedly, to retire it. That not every mechanism we've built over time remains essential because perhaps we've done additional architectural work, created new, entirely different systems to replace the need of those mechanisms. But we know that driving towards this with this cultural set of values is essential to get a highly durable, highly resilient outcome. And finally, the one thing I'd say that's also unique about Amazon culture is this expectation of escalation. That yes, we have runbooks that detail what to do in response to when the so-and-so widget fails. And yes, we have processes and procedures for how we develop and perpetuate our architectures. But we also know sometimes there's going to be really complex, difficult decisions. And sometimes we know that when something bad happens in that moment, you have to make fast decisions. And with this bias for action as our cultural norm. And this means getting the right people on the phone, getting the right people in the room by escalating. And yeah, sometimes that means you're going to have to page the vice president in the middle of the night. But at Amazon, it's okay to do that because she's expecting it, because she's part of this same culture. And it's this cultural normative foundation that allows us to achieve our operational excellence and allows us to achieve this high level of resiliency and availability that underpins everything we do at AWS and Amazon. So I hope this talk has been useful. I think it's critical to understand that true resilience, that true durability of complex systems is not just an engineering outcome. It is a cultural outcome. And that by building and maintaining and propagating a strong culture of diving deep, of ownership, of high standards, can allow not just us, but perhaps any organization to reach the highest levels of resiliency and the highest levels of availability. So thank you very much. I appreciate this time. Take good care.